Welcome back to A Plus Parents, everyone. And today, when you get to say, somebody famous, I get to hang out with somebody famous today. So I want to introduce to you Stef Knight, or sorry, I said it wrong already, Stef Kight, because I kept thinking there was an N in her name and it's not. So Stef is a journalist and she is a homeschooler through and through, who has now turned her life into being someone who is a reporter and a journalist. And I'm going to have her tell you all about what she does. And if you're watching the video portion of this right now and you see where she's in this little teeny tiny little cubicle. Well, she's in Washington, D.C. As she said, she's on the Hill. So I'll have you guys have her share a little bit about what that means and where she is as she's working right where she is. And she took some time out of her day to be with us. She's also the daughter of some very, very close personal friends of mine who we get to work with, and they're Brian and Melanie Wasco from the Right at Home team. So Steph, I'm just so excited to have you here. And so first of all, so welcome. And anything you wanted to share just a little bit about yourself and kind of and maybe tell us about where you are and, how you ended up in a little teeny tiny little space, right?
Of course. Yeah. Thanks for having me on. I'm excited to talk a little bit about my experience being homeschooled and where I'm at these days. And where I'm at physically is on the Hill in the Capitol, the big building with the big dome, on the House side. And there's an area for reporters called the Press Gallery. And within the Press Gallery, they have these tiny little rooms for you to take phone calls or record things. So I'm in one of those. So it's, very decorative. It's got some soundproofing, but it's not perfectly soundproof. So I can't be yelling in here. So that's where I'm at today. I've been doing some reporting, talking to members in the hallways and working on a couple stories.
Wow, that's very cool. Okay, so when you say talking to members, are you like the House of Representatives?
Yep. Yeah, I'm on the House side. So just a minute ago, before I jumped on this call, I was in the hallways and caught Representative Chip Roy, who's from Texas, and asked him about a bill that he's been pushing that would deal with the U.S.-Mexico border.
Wow. Okay. I know already people listening right now, they've got to be like, wait a minute, we're looking at you. You don't look that old, but here you are talking to, the House of Representatives, and, they're talking about bills that are dealing with immigration and things like that. And you have a super cool background and a specialty. So let's just kind of back up a little bit, because you were homeschooled was there a time that you weren't homeschooled? Is probably a better way to say that.
Nope, I was homeschooled all the way through high school. Obviously went to college from there, and I took some classes at a community college when I was in high school and attended, kind of like a co-op situation in Virginia Beach, which is where I grew up. But yeah, homeschooled all the way through my senior year.
Wow, that's amazing. And then where did you head to college when you headed to college?
So I ended up going to Old Dominion University in Norfolk, Virginia, and that was the local college. And the reality is that it was not the college I wanted to go to. And I applied to UVA and got in, and it was my dream school, but ultimately it was just nothing I want to do is going to pay me a lot of money. And so I ended up taking, some scholarship money and deciding to go the debt-free route and go to ODU. And it ended up being a great experience. I loved my time at ODU. I learned a lot. And it's where I first started reporting and getting into journalism and, was working on the student newspaper there. So I loved my time at ODU.
Wow. That's very good. It's so funny too, when people talk about universities, right? It's always the acronym, right? It's UVA, it's ODU. I'm a USF grad from South Florida and Tampa. So just kind of funny how we come through all that. All right. So there's just so many different things that I want to talk to you about. Let's start with this though. So here you are, you're a young person, you're being homeschooled, you're in Virginia Beach area. First of all, you're dealing with your parents who have Right at Home, which is a writing program, right? When did you discover yourself that you had a gift for writing?
So honestly, I always loved writing, and I'm sure it was influenced by both of my parents, as you pointed out, who are both, English focused people. My dad, made writing his entire career, creating Right at Home. I even remember being 6 or 7 years old when I proudly wrote my first poem. And so I feel like I've always been a writer. I had blogs throughout high school and in college. I was just one of those people who loved writing stories and writing about my life. And so when I went to college, I was like, I know I want to be an English major because I love reading books and writing. And this is sad, but I was like, I don't want to be a teacher. And so I was like, let me try journalism. Um, and then, my first journalism classes, I just really fell in love with it. And I did some actual TV reporting classes, which were super fun, piecing together video, and then also did the more traditional feature writing classes, and just discovered that I love getting to talk to people and ask them questions and turn that into an actual story. So I feel like writing has always been a consistent theme in my life, but it wasn't until college that I really honed in on, the skills of reporting and wanting to be a journalist.
Right. And I love that because I think so often, we tell young people, well, I try not to, right? But I think young people get told, let me say it that way. I think young people get told often that they're supposed to have it all figured out, by the time you're like 12 or 13 and know what you're going to be doing. And for some people, that's perfect. And that's a great plan. But for a lot of people, it's like you knew something that you love to do. And then you got to really kind of find your way and discover what it was and really, develop your passion that let you say, hey, this is the career path I want to get in. And you didn't even see that till you were in college, which is awesome. So
Yeah.
I love that. And I got you about not going the route of the teacher. I get you. So now, did you ever have your dad? Was he ever one of your instructors, like at a co-op or
Yeah.
anything? He was?
Yeah, so he taught all of my literature classes. And there's actually literature components to Write at Home as well, where he teaches lit courses. So he was always my English teacher. He's graded a lot of my essays from high school, all of that. And I credit him for my love of reading, because even in those classes, because it was a homeschooling co-op, instead of reading, just portions of the great novels and great works of literature, we would read the entire thing. And so, I really had a really great foundation of the classics of reading. I actually read the Iliad and the Odyssey all the way through, stuff like that. And then I carry that with me into college, where I was easily able to go through the literature courses because I was used to reading that many books. And now I have a book club that I host with a bunch of DC women, and we read books every month and discuss them. So that also is carried through my entire life.
That is so cool. That's so awesome. Okay. And I have to tell you, those two books that you said, I haven't read either one of them. So I'm a math guy, right? So I'm not a big reader, but that's so cool. Okay. So now here you are, you're finishing school and you're already, while you're in college, you're reporting and you're doing some TV segments and doing some different things. How did you break into the industries? And maybe tell us a little bit about Axios, the company that you work for now, kind of like what happened from college until here you are, and how you got into the industry, really how you got into, because I know there's young people that they're aspiring journalists and they're like, oh, I want to be like Stef, right? So how'd you do it?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And as usually happens, we had a family friend who is involved in the media landscape in DC, and I reached out, when I was in college, and ended up coming to DC to visit them and tour Politico. Jim Vandehei, who founded Axios, founded Politico before that, and at the time he was still at Politico, and I went and visited there and interviewed with various editors, reporters, just kind of a learning experience. It wasn't an internship necessarily. I was just going to hear from people who are really good at their jobs. And so it started with that, just reaching out, setting up meetings, talking to a bunch of really cool people, just learning more about the industry in DC. And then from there, one of the people I spoke to referred me to this internship that was at a radio station in DC, WTOP, and Federal News Radio was the specific radio station that I ended up going to and interviewing there. I got an internship at Federal News Radio. So then the following summer in 2014, I worked there, and it was a crazy experience covering federal news. Essentially, I mean, the reality is it was a very boring thing to be covering. It's like the policies that federal agencies implement that impact their work. It's like very, very dirty in the weeds DC stuff, but I learned a lot about what it means to work as a reporter in DC, how to reach out to people, how to cite a good story, and learned a lot. And then, fast forward a little bit of time, as I was about to graduate, saw that Jim Vandehei had left Politico, was looking to launch a new company of some sort. There weren't really any details, and I ended up reaching out to him, being like, hey, I'm graduating soon. Would love to be a part of whatever you're doing. Like, do you remember me? First of all, we had seen each other in 2014, but I hadn't really seen him since. And he ended up giving me a call and being like, I don't know what you'll be doing. I don't know how much I can pay you or when, but if you want in, you're in. And that was kind of the start of me being a part of Axios. So I was actually on the ground floor before we launched, before we even had a name. So, I was doing random like startup things, and it was a really exciting place to be at. And there were so many awesome people who I got to meet and work alongside. And now fast forward, 6.5 years now. And Axios is a large media company with nearing 500 employees across the country. So it's been a wild ride, and I feel very lucky to have known the people I knew and to have gotten the breaks I did. So it's been very cool.
Wow, that's how cool that you got to watch something get started. Like it's interesting you use the word startup, right? Because oftentimes, you think about being in journalism and being reporting and doing like you're coming to something that's established and been there for a while, but you really got to watch something grow from the very beginning. It didn't even have a name. That's actually kind of funny, right?
Yeah.
Really cool. Well, and along the way, even though you did, your background kind of puts you in that kind of, as you said, in the weeds, right? So you're kind of like learning, but you've developed a really cool expertise. It's like your mom sends me this, she sent me this clip. She goes, hey, Steph's on C-SPAN right now. And she's down at she's talking to the immigration and she's down at the border and they're doing this live thing. I was like, what? And so you've developed this real specialty in immigration. Tell us a little bit about that. Like, how did you do that? And then maybe some of the stories that you've had a chance to cover and what you've done. Because, for people to see you, on network TV and there you are, right? That's cool.
Yeah, no, it's been a wild ride for sure. And I feel like I kind of fell into the immigration beat. It wasn't something that I initially thought I had an interest in. But there was essentially a lot of news happening in the immigration beat in the Trump administration. Obviously, President Trump had some very clear stances when it comes to immigration, especially illegal immigration at the border. And so, I started covering some legal visas, which again, were a little bit more in the weeds, policy oriented. And then there were on the Hill, there were debates about what to do about DACA, about Dreamers, people who were brought to the US illegally as children. So I helped cover that issue. And then there was the infamous family separation policy, which occurred shortly after that. And that was when the Trump administration was, separating migrant kids from their parents at the border as part of their policies to crack down on people coming across illegally. So I helped cover that. And so, the portfolio kept building and building until I had, a lot of sources who were willing to talk to me about policy changes and experts who were willing to explain things to me. So I've sort of built an expertise from there. And it's, immigration is an interesting topic because there's the policy side, how, government decides to set policies and rules around who can come and who can't. It's also very political. It's something that, Republicans and Democrats have very different opinions on, and there are often really strong debates, and the issue comes into play during campaign seasons. So I've been able to cover it from a political angle. But then there's also just a real human element to it, getting to talk to people who are so desperate that they're willing to leave their home countries and head towards the US has, just this human element to it. And I love getting to talk to people and hearing their stories. So I think that's what's made it really fun to cover, is that I can have these really emotional human experiences with people and hear their stories. I can get into the weeds and like nerd out on all the details of immigration policy. And I can also be a part of, painting the crazy political picture that Americans care about so much. So.
Wow, that is very cool. While you're speaking, and I want to acknowledge you, because while you're speaking, one of the things I can hear about you is that you're interested in what's happening, and you're actually reporting on the human side of things. You're reporting on the politics sides of things, the policy side of things, and what I don't hear is your opinion about things, right? I'm actually hearing you saying this is what's happening, and as you're like, even though you're nerding out on the, that I love that phrase. That's great. But really, I just thank you for being that kind of person, because I just think that is that just says a lot about you, and probably too why so many people are so interested in you, because you've been on C-SPAN, you've been on Fox News, you've been kind of across the board where you've been able to report where you can actually be a reporter and you're not just set to one particular point of view. You actually are like presenting what's happening in the world. I just thank you for being that kind of person. That's just really awesome.
Well, you're welcome. I mean, I do the best I can, and a lot of credit goes to Axios and the kind of company that we've built, where we really do try to the best of our ability to report in a way that is focused on the facts and not on the opinion. And, that doesn't mean we're never going to, bring analysis or criticize any administration. We've criticized the Trump administration, we've criticized the Biden administration. But yeah, we do think it's important to focus on just giving people the information they need and let readers make their own opinions and decisions based on what our reporting shows.
That's awesome. Now, you said something too when we first got with Axiom, and they're like, hey, we don't know how much we can pay you. We don't know what you're going to do, right? And you look to where you are in just over 6 years, right? Tell us about some of the places that you've gotten to travel to when you're out reporting, because you have quite a, kind of a geographical track record, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's been a really fun part. I've always loved to travel. So it's been cool to have some opportunities to travel as part of my job. I've obviously visited the border, the US-Mexico border a couple times, which is always a really cool experience. I think it's very easy to have opinions about what immigration should look like when you're not there. And it's just so much more nuanced once you see it in action on the ground and see the impact on communities on the border and see actual people who have traveled like hundreds and hundreds of miles to get there. So that's always cool. I enjoy going to the border. Last year, probably one of my favorite stories and assignments and trips was I went to Guatemala last year in August. I believe it was end of August, with some Homeland Security officials who their whole job is to work with foreign police and train them to help them stop human smugglers and drug smugglers from heading to the US. Because essentially the US can't arrest people in other countries, even if they're intending to come to the US. Because of international laws, we can't arrest someone in a different country. So what the US does is we just help provide support for these foreign groups of law enforcement. And so it was just a really interesting trip. I learned a lot, and it was, pretty exclusive. No one had really given the amount of access that they gave me. And that was largely due to relationships I had with various sources who worked in the Department of Homeland Security, who trusted me and felt like I would do a good job with that story. So that was just cool, getting to go to a foreign country and see them train law enforcement. They gave me a gun and made me go through the training at one point. So it was very hands-on. I witnessed a raid. They actually arrested someone in front of me, and I went into the suspect's home as they were, going through the person's stuff. So it was just one of those really eye-opening on the ground experiences. And I was really proud of the story I got out of it too.
That is so cool. So you know what's really funny? So your mom, she brags. I mean, just brags and just loves that you did that. But I didn't hear the part where you were actually boots on the ground kind of thing. I think that's how they say that, right? And there you are going into a suspect's home, right? Did she know that was happening, or did you tell her after it happened?
I told her afterwards. Honestly, I didn't know going into it that I would have that level of access. And I want to clarify that the gun I was handed was not loaded. It was just a training thing.
Even better. Okay, good. Well, I guess that's good and bad at the same time, right?
And I was it was just in a training situation. They were teaching these law enforcement officers, how to do certain things. And they were like, you should try it. But yeah, I did tell her after the fact, because I honestly didn't know ahead of time. So
that's probably really good. That's good for everybody involved, right?
Yeah.
That's funny. Okay, so now you just finished a piece on education, and I had a chance. I took a look at it, and I was seeing some. I'm so excited that you're a data person, right? Because that's right. I go to the charts. I want to look at the numbers and see what's happening there. But one of the things we hear this so often too, and definitely the view has changed over the last few years for sure. But, it used to be like, given that you grew up as a homeschooler, right? That wasn't the cool thing to do. Now it's a little cooler, right? But as you were first, growing up and people were like, why are you doing that? What is homeschooling and how does it work, right? But you just did a really in-depth, really article and investigation into what's happening in education today. And the trends are shifting, the trends, like I think one of the things that, that the pandemic did was it really opened people's eyes to what was happening in education, and not necessarily where people came up with whether something was good or bad, but what it did was it opened up the opportunity for choices, and people could start to look to see that homeschooling was an option and they could do it, or whatever, the other kinds of choices they could do for personalized learning, or whether they were doing more in-home or whether they were doing part-time at school, part-time at home, that kind of thing. Tell us a bit about the article and what were you most surprised by when you were doing your research?
Yeah, so as you pointed out, in addition to immigration and covering general politics stuff, I do a lot of data focused stories. So that's a theme. If you go to my byline on Axios.com, you'll probably see a lot of data focused stories. And this is a polling group who I've worked with in the past, and they have a really interesting way of polling people where their whole goal is to better understand what people privately really do believe about things. Because oftentimes when people are asked questions for a survey, there's a little bit of a bias. They're going to say what they think they're supposed to say, or, they're aware that they're being asked for a certain reason. So they have certain techniques that limit that bias effect that allows people to just say what they actually think. And with this polling, they actually ask people, where would you rank this education priority? And then they ask them, where do you think most other people would rank it? So you get to see this contrast between what they view what they think the majority wants and then what they actually want. And what it shows is people have a really skewed perspective on what the priorities are for education, is for K through 12 education. Essentially, generally the polling found that adults were overestimating the importance of preparing kids for college and preparing kids for an internship and the highest paying jobs, that parents actually didn't care as much about that. They wanted more focus on kids learning practical skills and just being able to learn at their own pace and according to their own interests. They wanted a more tailored kind of an education experience, which again, to your point, does kind of point to more of a homeschooling route where there is more, attention to what each individual child needs or may want out of their educational experience. So I thought that was super interesting. And it is in line with other polling I've seen that has shown an interest in homeschooling rising, largely because of, COVID-19 and school closures and some of the political wars in the education space.
Wow, that is so cool. Okay, so we're going to put all the links up so people can, because they're going to want to read about your articles and see the different things. So we'll get your links up for that, for Axios, so they can find you there. When one thing is that we hear from time to time, homeschoolers, and how do you get socialized, and and there's like all these, the questions that people used to ask. And just spending some time with you, we don't have to ask those questions anymore. Like people just hearing you, it's like, oh my gosh, you're out there and you're networking and you're getting to meet, you get to hang out with people from the Homeland Security and you're talking to congressmen and House of Representative members. You have all these really amazing things going on, and traveling and being part of a company that's growing from the ground up, and just to watch all that happen. If anybody's ever asked the question, why homeschooling? I'm just gonna send them to you to check you out and look at the stuff you've done. It's like, here's my answer right here, right? So this is really, really, really awesome. Do you have, as you're looking now and you're in your career right now and you kind of see, where you are and what's happening, do you look to the future at all? Like is there something that you're kind of like looking towards, like, hey, I might be interested in this down the road? And I didn't ask you that before we got going today. So I'm just kind of popped up for me. So I hope that's okay,
Yeah.
me asking you that.
No,
But,
I don't mind at
what are your
all.
plans for okay, good. Yeah. What do you see for your future?
I mean, I don't mind you asking. I don't know that I have a great answer for you. I really do love reporting. And at this point, I do want to continue reporting. And right now I've been focused on the Hill more. I've been covering Congress a little bit more. So, in the near future, I'm hoping to just improve my coverage of, what's happening in the House, what's happening in the Senate, and just continue to write better political stories on what's happening and explaining it to the general public. Beyond that, I'm not sure. I know that this is a space I want to stay in for a long time, but whether I want to become an editor one day or, do a different form of journalism, I'm not totally sure, but I'm having a really fun time where I'm at.
It's so great. And you know what? I'm so happy to hear you say that, because oftentimes it's people like they have this plan about, okay, well, 5 years from now, I'm going to be doing this. And 5 years from after that, I'll be doing, and it's like you're in the flow and you're going to let your own passion kind of lead you to what's next. So I think that's really, really awesome. So, all right. So now we got our young aspiring journalists out there, our young aspiring reporters, right? Let's say you could look back and you could say hi to your 12, 13, 14-year-old self, right? And you were going to give yourself some advice, something that you've seen now that you're an adult and you're working in the industry, and I'm saying to give yourself advice, right? Because I know there's lots of young people that are listening right now. Is there anything you'd share with yourself about, hey, 12-year-old, this is what I think you should, focus on, right?
Yeah. I feel like that's a hard question. In general, like my advice to anyone who is considering a career in journalism is just like read a lot of reporting. Figure out there's a lot of different kinds of reporting out there. There's, the hard news reporting, there's more analysis reporting, there's TV reporting, there's long form, there's short form, there's Twitter, there's TikTok, like there's all kinds of ways to be a reporter today. And I think, I was a little lost initially. I wasn't sure exactly what I wanted, what style fit for me. And that's something that you can probably start figuring out a little bit early. And also like, you're never too young to be a reporter. Writing about what's happening in your own community is really important. And start early, start young. If it's something you think you want to do, start telling the stories you're hearing. Start interviewing your neighbors or interviewing your homeschool co-op or interviewing the people in your life. Just get in the habit of telling stories on your own. And that's a huge part of it. And that'll improve your skills and give you examples to provide to people when you end up looking for a job. Like, see, I've already done it. Even just having a blog was a big thing for me. People saw that I could be consistent and write about things, even if it wasn't necessarily a hard-hitting political story.
That is amazing advice, because it's like oftentimes like we wait. Well, when I'm, after I get out of high school, after I get out of college, I'm like, we're waiting. It's like, and no, get into it now and get going and start discovering your passion and what you really, what really works for you. I think that's the best advice I've heard. So it's just really, really awesome. I think the other thing I've noticed, in today's world of young people, and I'm so excited about this, and whether it's public school, homeschool, I keep hearing more and more educators, parents, and one of the things that, the conversation now is to encourage young people to do what they love to do, and find their path and find their passion, and your career path will unfold inside of that. When I grew up, right, it wasn't like that. My passion was, those were my hobbies, right? My parents were like, well, no, that's a great hobby. And when you get to college, then, but so I just, I feel like that is a trend that has found its way into young people's lives now. And I'm so excited about that. And you just echoed it. It's really like, well, what is it that you're passionate about? And don't wait, start now. So I think that is just fabulous advice for young people.
Yeah. And I would just jump in on that too, because I totally agree. I think it's an amazing trend. And sometimes though, I feel the need to remind people that it is still a job, and that even in your dream job, there will be moments where you feel insecurity or you feel like this panic of like, am I doing the right thing? And I feel like it's just important to be real. I love my job and I feel so lucky to have it. But there are some days where I think, what did I get myself into? Why am I doing this? Do I really want to do this? And I just think that's normal. I think people should normalize that, like, jobs are hard and every career you choose is going to have something in it that is difficult, and you're going to have moments of questioning yourself, but that doesn't mean it's not the dream job, and it doesn't mean you can still be thankful for it. So
that is awesome. That's so awesome. And I can't agree more. I got interviewed one time a long time ago when I was first getting started, and I was writing curriculum and I was doing all the things I was doing. And the reporter asked me, she said, what do you recommend for people that want to do what you're doing? And my answer was, don't do it.
That's what a lot of journalists.
It's too much work, right?
Yeah, that is honestly, that's kind of a joke. A lot of like journalism classes, that's what teachers will tell their kids. I heard that all the time in college. I was in journalism courses with journalist teachers who would say like, basically try to tell us not to go into journalism because it's such a hard business. And, I do think it's important to keep that in mind, that it's difficult, but you still have to go for it sometimes.
Absolutely. And that's what's changed. If I get asked that question today, now I'm like, absolutely go for it. Right. Because it's like, yeah, is it hard work? Absolutely. Are there days you don't want to do it? Absolutely. I just pull the covers up over my head and be like, no. Right. But then when you're in it and you're doing it and you feel it. Right. And it is, the fatigue of the work goes away and you have that energy and, and you're doing something that makes a difference. And that's it. That's what I love that young people have that opportunity now where they have the opportunity to contribute, be self-expressed and make a difference. And it's just great. And you're just, you're just like a walking, talking testament of that. Right. So I'm just super excited. Stef, first of all, thank you for, thanks for arranging your day to be here. I know you're very, very busy and in your teeny tiny little cubicle that you're in. Right. So, but I just so appreciate you and the work that you're doing. And we're going to make sure that people know more about what you're doing so they can read more. And I want people out there that want to nerd out. You are the person to go to. So that's super cool. Again, Stef, anything you want to say as we kick off here, but and thank you, really. Thank you for making time to do this today.
Yeah, no, I mean, thank you. I'm, really happy to be on here and just talking about my experience. And I love getting to tell people about Axios and journalism. And obviously for any of your listeners who have questions about what it's like to be a reporter, I'm on Twitter. You can DM me. I have an email address. I'm always willing to, help people out however I can or answer questions. So I'm an open door policy in my email inbox. So
that's awesome. Well, we'll make sure we get all that in the show notes so people know how to reach out to you. So that'll be great. And then they can follow you on Twitter and see what's happening. So that's great. Very cool. Well, Stef, thanks so much again. And everyone, thanks for tuning in to A+ Parents today. And we'll see y'all next time. Bye, everyone.